So when you're dealing with people that $50 means everything to them and you're going to buy $50 worth of meth, that highly likelihood of them ripping you off, robbing you, setting you up just over $50. You wouldn't even imagine like $60 worth of weed, but man, there's so much violence around weed, and it's just weed that people say. But we've had 2 homicides over weed here in Kansas City recently. It was all Snapchat deals where they show up and it's like, well, it's $60. Like, what can go wrong? And then they have robbing the kid and getting a struggle over the gun and getting killed.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the next episode of Game of Crimes with Murph in the morning. So glad you came back to join us once again. Got an outstanding guest for you here, somebody that I was introduced to by a friend. Just finished reading his book that hasn't come out yet. We're going to tell you all about it, though. And let me tell you, I'm already getting goosebumps talking about this because of what this man has been through, serving his fellow man, serving his community, and serving his country. Our guest today is a former U.S. Army veteran who we're going to talk a little bit about that, but I'm going to tell you right now, he did so good in basic, he got an opportunity to go to West Point. And what'd he do? No, thank you. We're going to find out why. And then, as if the Army wasn't enough, he decided to become a police officer in Kansas City, Missouri. And he had to retire before his 20 years is up. And that's the crux of our story today. I don't want to go any further into that. I do want to say he's got a book coming out. This episode is being released on February 17th. His book came out on Amazon on February 15th, 2 days ago. The name of the book is Undercover Junkie. Highly, highly recommend you pick that book up. At the end of the show, and you'll probably hear me talk about his book, more about this as we go along, because you know how I am. Just real proud of what he has been able to put in writing, because this is part of the healing process. You know, we're going to have some fun today. We always have fun on the show with Game of Crimes, but it is also a very serious topic that we're going to talk about today, and that's PTSD. You know, it's not the first time I've brought something like that up on here, and you've heard my stories about dealing with it, and, you know, thank the good Lord above that I was able to handle it, and he took care of my problems. Today's guests struggle with it a little bit. I'll say that. So let me just tell you who we're talking about today. It's an honor and a pleasure to introduce you to Brent Cartwright. Brent, welcome to the show, brother.
Hey, buddy, I really appreciate you having me, man. Thank you so much.
Well, and I want to point out to everybody, too, because I'm glad you've got that sign behind you, the cover of your book, Junkie. And so, listeners, you can see what the book looks like, because he had to send me a PDF copy, so I couldn't see what the cover looked like. But just keep that in mind. That's what it looks like. And he's also got his own challenge coins. You got it there handy, Brent?
I do it. Yeah, we law enforcement, military guys love these challenge coins. So
there you go.
This is from my UC days. Actually, our department outlawed it after a while because it has drug paraphernalia and stuff on it. And being a dope unit, of course, you can't have that stuff on it because you're misrepresenting the department. So,
what's the back of the coin look like?
It's got my company logo on it, and it's got the skyline of Kansas City, the blue line, and then the bullet shots for. It's a shameless plug. I got shot, so put some bullet holes in it.
For what you went through, and it's like I tell all our guests, you guys are giving me your time. You know, I'm not paying you to be here. I didn't even have to send you a headset.
Wait a minute,
you already got your own send it. Well, checks in the mail. So,
yeah, third-party out-of-state checks, right?
I think I should have waited until the end of the episode to mention that. But it's an honor to have you on here, brother. It really is. All joking aside. And, you know, our regular listeners, we have our small town police blotter section. And I mentioned this to Brent, and he didn't even hesitate. In fact, I sent him an article, and he sent back laughing emojis because it's pretty good.
Hey, Missouri, man, we're like Florida, but with mountains. So we try to keep up.
Yeah, y'all got a long way to go to catch up to Florida, let me tell you. This place, my wife and I have only lived in Florida this time 3 years, and it's just amazing what goes on here. I shouldn't be shocked, but I am every week. So to go along with our small town police blotter, we have a little disclaimer that I like to read. This is a show about crime. We talk about bad people doing bad things and bad people doing bad things to good people. Now, we take our stories very seriously, but we're never going to miss an opportunity to have a chuckle at the expense of some of these dumbass criminals that we have come on here. So today, Brent lives in Missouri. He was a police officer in Kansas City, Missouri. So he's going to read an article from Missouri, and, you know, I'm going to read one from Florida. All right, Brent, so take it away, buddy.
Yeah, you're going to one-up me, I'm sure, but that's your show, so I'll let you have that win.
Thank you, man.
Yeah. All right, so the title of this one's Naked Missouri Couple Rode Stolen Lawnmower in Broad Daylight. Now, it's Missouri, so I love the state, and there's not a whole lot of people you want to see naked, so this automatically just had me going. And, of course, being former law enforcement, I did a bunch of research on these because I needed to see what these people look like. And look them up yourself. You don't want to see them, but so a couple is facing felony charges if they were spotted riding a lawnmower in the nude at 8:30 in the morning on a Missouri road. 8:30 in the morning, naked on a lawnmower.
Does it give their ages?
Yeah. According to the court filing, Tanya Hopper, 40, and Larry Webster, 55, were busted following a bizarre incident near Joplin. So Joplin's more the southern side of the state, and southwestern side. Larry looks like Uncle Leo from Seinfeld. You just need to get the marker and put the big eyebrows on him, and he would look like Uncle Leo. And Tanya says she's 40, but she totally looks like she's 60.
Okay.
Yeah. Meth is a terrible drug. So responding to a 911 call about a naked man driving an orange lawnmower with a nude woman in his lap, Jasper County Sheriff's Office deputies encountered Hopper and Webster in front of a friend's residence. So not only are they naked driving around, they're going to their friend's house. Yeah, 8:30 in the morning. Maybe they were just mowing their friend's lawn. I don't know. I mean, I don't mow my friends' lawns. But yeah. So riding lawnmower was parked outside the home. So during questioning, Hopper and Webster admitted to the naked mower ride, and they claimed they'd been skinny dipping near Turkey Creek, which, if you've been to the creeks around there, they're pretty gross and they're pretty dirty. I don't know why you would ever want to swim in the cesspool. So they were swimming there when they came out of the woods and somebody had stole their clothes.
Sure they did.
At 8:30 in the morning, that would have to be a kid to do that. I don't know many kids that are up at 8:30, but I mean, if I saw them swimming, I'd probably take their clothes too. I mean, that's just the way it is.
That's just what goes on in Missouri.
Yeah, it just had, hey man, you got to keep it funny. So,
yeah,
instead of walking home naked, they said that they found a lawnmower in the woods and they decided to drive it, of course, to their friend's house. But here's the crazy part: is this is a zero-turn mower. It's not even like your old Craftsman ride mower like my parents used to have. So,
yeah,
they're on a zero-turn. So, of course, she's on his lap driving. There's not a whole lot of suspension in these things, so there's going to get some pretty good bounce.
Well, I'm just thinking that those zero-turn mowers that I've seen only have one seat, so I wonder where she's sitting and what she's holding on to.
Yeah, she's in his lap. I mean, if they're a couple, I guess that's okay. I mean, I saw her. I would not want her in my lap. I would make her walk.
Well, I'm thinking he probably went to jail with a smile on his face anyway, right? Oh, my goodness. And you don't know this rule yet. We only have one rule on here on the Game of Crimes, and that's kids don't do meth. This is what it leads to, right?
You know that they've been up like 3 days when they decided to go swimming at 8:30 in the morning. So,
that's why
yeah, that's right. The clothes were probably like 2 miles away. They'd probably been walking and swimming all night.
I love it.
Yeah.
All right, brother. Thank you for reading that.
Yeah.
Brent. And here
That's a good one.
Switch over to Florida. So we're recording this on January 29th, and this just happened 4 days ago, which is really unusual to find these articles this quick. But so before heading off to drug rehab on New Year's Eve, Octavia Wells allegedly decided to score some more narcotics just for the road trip. She's 41 years old. Of course, she lives here in Florida. She's up in Panama City. So what she did is she texted her dealer. She said, hey, I got $45 to spend before I go away to get better from all this stuff. And she wanted to get a couple of points of fentanyl. Now, I've never heard of fentanyl, the dosage units referred to as points. Have you?
Usually it was just heroin. Point is like 0.1, so it's just a microdose.
Yeah.
I mean, I hope not to not out, but
and,
I've never heard of fentanyl going that way, but
I hadn't either. In fact, I haven't heard of anybody actually ordering up fentanyl just by itself, but I've been out of the business for a while here. So anyway, she identified herself by her name, Octavia, and she arranged the drug transaction. Well, after she drove to meet her dealer at this Tom Thumb convenience store there in Panama City, guess who was there waiting on her? The police. And they got arrested. And that's when Octavia realized, oh, maybe I didn't call my dealer. Maybe I called a cop. Oops. And here's what happened. Now, she had been texting with a police officer named Steve Pettyjohn. He was an investigator with Bay County. Goes by the nickname of PJ. She had saved his number in her phone after a previous interaction with Pettyjohn. And I'm sure it was criminal and not riding around naked on a lawnmower. But there's no other information in the criminal complaint on that one. So the prior interaction was with the Sheriff's Special Investigations Division, which handles drug-related probes. That's going on. Well, Wells told cops that Pettyjohn's initials were similar to her drug dealer's, which caused the mix-up. Well, she allowed a cop to look at her phone and she confirmed that was the same phone as the same one that she used to text Pettijohn. A search of Wells' vehicles turned up a variety of drug paraphernalia. There's a surprise, some of which tested positive for the presence of fentanyl. So this is not her first.
Well, she's going to rehab. I mean, she's just one last little hit before you do it.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
So she was charged with 1 felony, 2 misdemeanors, booked into the county jail, subsequently released on a $5,000 bond, scheduled for a January 30th arraignment. While on pretrial release, she has been ordered by a judge to not possess or consume alcohol, and she has to submit to urinalysis tests. I mean, come on now. How stupid, right? It's
revolving doors sometimes, man.
You know,
they keep you busy. I mean,
yes.
that's the deal.
We used to joke around at DEA that we have the best job security button in the world, right?
Yeah. You can't fix stupid. That's the hard part.
Right. And unfortunately, I think it hits everybody's family just a little bit when it comes to the drug business. It is. Yeah. Now, before we get into this, as I was reading your book, I came across a quote in there that I just thought has to be read here on Game of Crimes, especially right after we did the small town police blotter in Florida. Because when you're in the Army, you've got a quote in there that most of the guys in the bunks across from me look like obvious criminals. Then I learned they were from Florida and realized that was just how they looked. That's just so appropriate.
I didn't even put that 2 and 2 together that would come out on this. So,
hey,
I'm glad you're laughing about it, not yelling at me. Yeah, my hometown's just so tiny and small, pretty white bread, if you will, man. And so when I sat in basic training, look across, I'm like, man, and those dudes were like hardcore dudes. And I was like, okay, well, they're just from Florida. Okay, that's just what they look like.
I'm sure a lot of them had a choice from a judge.
They did actually.
Or you go to the Army.
Yep, they totally did.
Yeah.
That was the mid '90s when that was still going on. That kind of pressure was going on for pushing people to the military service.
Yeah. And for our regular listeners, you can probably tell I'm not in my regular little office at home with all the backdrop stuff. My wife and I are spending some time over at the beach on the east coast of Florida, secret undisclosed location called Satellite Beach. Shit. I just gave it up. Anyway, we've been coming here for years. And so this is a little condo we rent, and that's the best I could do back here. So you get a Narcos poster, you get the Game of Crimes poster, which is new. So that's why things look different today. And that's why I've got a headset on. I don't have my regular microphone and all that set up with me. These are the headsets I send to our guests. And fortunately, Brent already has his own setup there, but the headsets work great. And it's a whole lot easier to bring that rather than to bring the boom and the microphone and the sound box that everything has to plug into. And, it's just a lot of stuff take everywhere you go.
Yeah, you just look like an airline pilot. Yeah.
There you go. I think it looks cool, don't it? Ready for takeoff. Man, where's that other plane going? Shit, get off my runway. Anyway, we were cops. We're not comedians. So it's all kind of cop humor. Yeah. I want to tell you how I met Brent here. So you folks remember Patrick O'Donnell. He was a guest on the show on episode 77, which is November of 22. And Patrick has his own podcast called Cops and Writers. Patrick and I call and refer guests to each other all the time. I just spoke to him yesterday, and looks like he's coming down here to Orlando in February. So we've never met in person, so we're hoping to get together at least for coffee or a meal while he's down here. But when people recommend potential guests to me, if I don't know them, I try my best to vet everybody, because I only want to bring people on here that have actually done the job. I hate to say this, but you know how it is, man. We got a lot of brothers and sisters that will claim things that they weren't involved with if they think they can get on the show or write a book, and it's not just us. It's the military has the same issues. Some of the Navy SEALs are coming out claiming responsibility for things that maybe they didn't really do themselves.
Yeah, a lot of fluff.
Yeah. So I had seen that in doing my research, you were assigned to an ATF task force for a while there in Kansas City. So I've got a lot of friends in ATF, and I reached out to my buddy Lou Velozzi, Lou was on the 4th episode of Game of Crimes. He was one of our very first guests back in July of 2021. So the show's been going over 3.5 years now. I love it. But Lou didn't know you, but he knew a lady who worked out there. And I'm not going to say her full name, Misty. I would just say Misty, but he put me in touch with her. And when I mentioned your name, you got glowing recommendations from her.
Which is shocking from her.
Really?
I mean, we worked together for several years, so she's a good friend, but we're almost like brother and sister. So a lot of fighting back and forth. So she must have just been we haven't talked in a long time. So, you never know. Last time I talked to her, maybe I pissed her off, but no, she
Well, she said you guys went to undercover school together, right?
Yeah, up in Iowa, we went to an undercover school, which was funny because when we went to, it was undercover training. By the time we got there, we'd already both probably had several hundred hand-to-hand transactions under our belt. So, like, why are we here? But you know how we law enforcement and you government workers, we like to go on trips and eat and drink for free and stay in hotels. So
there you go.
Send me somewhere for free. Unfortunately, it was just Iowa. We couldn't find somewhere more exciting.
Well, Misty, if you hear this, thank you very much for taking the time to talk to an old fart and for your recommendation. Because I tell you, I read that book and I'm thoroughly impressed. And so we're going to get into that here shortly. But Brent, like we usually do here on Game of Crimes, is I'll just ask you about your background. What were your family dynamics? Where you grew up? Did you have brothers and sisters? What your mom and dad did? In high school, did you play sports? You know, all that kind of stuff. So I'll turn it over to you for a few minutes.
Yeah, man. So I grew up in Texas initially in a little town called Forney, so real tiny outside of Dallas. And my dad got transferred up to Kansas City about halfway through my school age years. And we moved up to the north end of Kansas City in a really tiny town. I think at the time it had like 2,000 people in it. And that's where I lived. And I went to school. Now, my friends will tell me I didn't do sports in school because I did track and cross country. So it's not a real sport in their eyes. But to me, it's a real sport. So, I was a distance runner and a little dude. And until I got hurt, running was my outlet and stress relief. So, that was really about it. Didn't do anything special. Both my grandpas were in World War II. My dad was a military guy during Vietnam. And my brother joined up the Army right after the first Gulf War. And I always kind of had a call for service, but I really was doing it to pay for school. That's why I wanted to pay. I didn't want to make a career out of military service. So I was like, well, what do you do? So you join the National Guard so you can do the 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks out of the year, and still maintain like a certain lifestyle.
Well, did you have any brothers and sisters?
Yeah. So my brother, he's 4 years older than me. My sister about 2 years older than me, and I'm the baby.
Yeah. Did they go into military or law enforcement?
Yep. My brother, he was a combat engineer, combat engineer. And then my sister is a paramedic.
Oh, so nice.
Still called service.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm sure mom and dad's very proud of all of you.
Absolutely. But I think they worry a little more for me and my police career. And then my sister, they worry about the toll that we see takes on us. So they tell us all the time too. They're just super proud.
So you went to the military first and then went to college. Is that right?
Yeah, I went straight to basic training in the National Guard, and then you get out, and they try to pressure you to join, go active duty, and I did really well. So the captain was transferring over to do some teaching at West Point, and he's like, hey, I'll give you a letter of recommendation for West Point. You still have to go, and you have to get a congressman, your local representative or somebody, and you get some other letter of recommendations. But you're really smart, and you should think about this and be a military career guy. I was like, man, just not for me. And I'm glad for those that are. It just wasn't for me. So I got out and went straight to college.
Well, now in the Army, when you're going through basic training, you actually received an award that resulted in that letter for a recommendation to go to West Point. What was that position?
So that's the Distinguished Honor Graduate. I mean, it's like the valedictorian of your basic trainings. I was a field artillery guy, which was so stupid for me. But you take your whole battalion and your top scores on all your PT tests and everything else get to go in front of a board, and you get tested on some other things. And if you score all highest on all this stuff, you win. And that was me. I say it was funny for me because I was an artillery guy. Like, I'm shucking 102-pound shells on the 155 millimeter howitzers. I only weighed 109 pounds when I started basic training. I was a distance runner. I was running 10 miles a day, and all state runner, and that was like my thing. But I shouldn't have been. I went to the recruiter and said, hey, man, point to notice, do not recommend this move. Don't just go to the military recruiter and say, put me wherever. Because that's basically what I did. And they'd be like, oh, cool, here's where we're really short, and we're going to stick you in some job you really don't want. So, or fit.
I mean, my best friend in high school ran cross country, and I only had two good friends because we were little shits. But that's definitely a sport. Holy cow.
Yeah. Oh, it's grueling, man. It's a mental game all the way through and physical through and through. I actually coach junior high cross country now here in my local hometown. And it's funny because that's one of the few sports you can actually play in 7th and 8th grade, or at least for 7th graders here in this town. So, because they've canceled football until a certain age, and soccer, you have to do it in club sports. So you get all these kids that want to try something, and they're like, well, we can only do this for school, and they try it. And they all come out, they're like, oh my gosh, football practice was so much easier.
Yeah. Oh, it's
Yeah.
it's totally endurance. How many people were in your graduating class?
How
Do you
many
remember?
graduated? Because there may be a difference there. We are in Missouri. No, I think we were right around 200 because they take the neighboring town as well.
Yeah.
Once you got through elementary school, that town was so small, you had to come to our school for junior high and above. So about
So
200.
now you're in the military and you're doing all your training and they find out about you cross country running, don't they?
Yeah. Well, again, one of these things that the recruiter doesn't tell you. My brother warned me, but he said, don't stand out. So I did a lot of things to not stand out, or I didn't come in with long hair, so that when they buzzed me, it wasn't like a big show. But the first PT test, man, my ego wouldn't get out of the way, and we went on a run, and I like blast this 2 mile. The push-ups I maxed, the sit-ups I almost maxed, and then the run I just completely demolished. I mean, I'm sub 10-minute 2 miler, so it was like, this guy's a runner. So then I, of course, got really hammered. And then they put me on the Army's cross country team there. So I get to wake up at an hour before everybody else and run 6 to 8 miles and then do the normal PT. And of course, I weigh barely anything. And so they're like doubling up my rations at breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So I'm like, well, now I'm running like 10, 12 miles a day and doing other PT stuff. And it was hard to catch that many calories, but I did, man. I gained like 60 pounds in like a 5-month period.
But that wasn't fat.
God, I was solid, and I was still running fast. I'm solid muscle, but I only weighed 165 pounds. But
Yeah, that's pretty good
still
shape.
a lightweight.
I don't know. So you went through Army basic training, but when do you have to opt into National Guard versus regular Army?
Right when you sign up.
Oh,
So
so
yeah,
that was the plan all along.
Yeah. Again, I was like, well, I just want to pay for college. And in Missouri, they had a tuition reimbursement plan where you can get your GI Bill and the tuition reimbursement, and then a student loan repayment plan at the time. And so my parents had tried to save up some money for all of us to go to school. It's just 3 kids, and the way cost of college is even worse now. The military was like a great option. So
my wife and I have a nephew that's the highest enlisted officer in the state of West Virginia. He's the command sergeant major for the Army, but he's also is the highest ranking enlisted non-officer. Something to do with that he's also over the Air Force National Guard people there. I don't know how it all works, but he's told me about his deployments to Iraq. I think he was over there 3 different times, and he was expected to be like regular Army. It's not like they went over and just did KP duty or security at the base. They were out doing the job.
Well, that was back in the 90s where Clinton put a lot of the combat arms in the National Guard. So it was a way of cost saving money for the defense budget. And so a lot of these combat arms are in the National Guard. So when it comes time to that, I mean, it's not you're just going doing flood duty. I mean, you come to get deployment, you're going over in your combat arms.
Yeah. So you decide to get out of the National Guard in late 03, right?
Tried to.
Before you say anything else, I'm going to say right now, I think you got a little Murphy blood in you because Murphy's Law is getting ready to smack you, isn't it?
Man, so I actually got out before 03. Because the way the military is National Guard, especially, you do 6 years of your National Guard time and then 2 years in active reserve where they could call you back at any time.
Right.
So I get out, and then I knew that this plan with the tuition reimbursement was you had to spend 3 years past your last payment. So I quit taking school payments, and I was 6 months short. So then the Attorney General's office in Missouri sends me a letter, says, hey, you owe us $18,000 in the next 30 days or get back in the National Guard and serve out to make sure you have enough time past your last tuition reimbursement plan. Okay, so cool. I just need 6 months. Give me 6 months. And they're like, oh, we only do 1-year plans. So they put me back in for 1 year. And at the 10 and a half months, they say, hey, okay, we're not going to make you come back to drill next week or next month. Go ahead and turn all your gear in. And I mean, at this point, I graduated college and I was trying to get on with my life and do something. And I was just burnt out of this National Guard unit. So I turned my crap in, and I've got my middle fingers flying and telling them all what I think of them. And they called me like 3 weeks later and said, hey, remember how we said you weren't really all the way out? Well, you're not. And we're getting deployed. I was like, cool, that sucks for you guys. I'm sorry. And they said, oh, yeah, but you're still on the unit list. So you're getting stop lost, and you're going to come with us.
Welcome back. But now they didn't send you over as an artillery guy, did they?
No. So they said, we don't need artillery. We need military police and convoy security, especially. So this was 03. Afghanistan was pretty good full swing. Iraq was just starting. And so they trained us up and reclassified us to MPs. And I was like, MPs? So I meant they pull my unit, and if you are an artillery guy, you can have all kinds of stuff, DUIs and things in your background, and they're still like cool. But once you're an MP, you have to get a different classification level and your security clearance. And we had a lot of people get bumped for the security clearance thing. So they backfill us with truck drivers, mechanics, communications people. They all became MPs and got thrown into our units. We're like one big melting pot of backgrounds. And then they said, well, we were fully expecting to go to Iraq, and we were all on board. This is what we want to do. Now, it took us some growing pains, man. We were at each other's throats while we were training back up in Fort Leonard Wood. They buried us down in these World War II barracks that were just terrible. 7 days a week, training for like 16 hours a day. And then we get the word, hey, you're staying stateside. You're going to Fort Lewis, Washington. So at first, man, you're like, you got to be kidding me. You're stop-lossing me. Like, let me go be a part of the war. And no, we get to go stay and be actual police officers on Fort Lewis. So that's what we did.
I want to say first, before I bring up the next thing, that two things. One is you were like an all-American kid. I mean, you're already making plans for your life. You're involved in sports. You're in a small-town community. I'm sure you have a lot of values instilled and morals instilled by your family that big city places where there's not a dad present, they don't get that. They don't have that fatherly figure teaching them things as they go. And you're going into the Army with the right attitude. You're shaving your head before you get there because you know what to expect, and you're in shape when you get there. And that's what I got from the book, was that here's this all-American kid that's got his life laid out. He's got a plan. He's going to serve his country, which is extremely honorable. That's the most honorable thing you could do. And then I think you met your wife while you were in college, Wesley.
Yep.
Married. You guys are still married to this day.
Yeah. She keeps me around for some reason, but yeah.
Let me tell you, we all marry up.
Yes. I don't know how I did it. I totally married down, and when you find the right one and you lock them down, that's for sure.
Yeah, no, you married up. You didn't marry down.
Oh, no, she married down.
There you go.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But then there's one other thing you mentioned a while ago. When you got there and started taking your test in the Army, and the word ego came up. And I just want to point that out right now because Brent and I had a conversation yesterday before doing the recording today. And just like all our guests, I asked if there's anything you don't want to talk about. And as we were talking about his book, I told him, I said, man, your ego, that's one of the biggest egos I've ever seen in law enforcement. And you folks will understand that better here after we get into these stories. So I'll quit wasting time here. But now, so you're an MP out in Washington State, right?
Yep. Fort Lewis, just south of Seattle, near Tacoma.
And tell us about when you were out in the parking lot there in the middle of the night and that guy's roaming around.
Yeah, so we're patrolling like police officers, and if you're not doing that, you're on gate duty because they had locked. Before, you used to be able to just drive on to post, and now you have to have the sticker on your deal and the passes. So just outside the post, if you didn't have insurance for your car, a lot of people, when they came back from Iraq, they put their car in the impound lots on post so that nobody messes with it when you get it out. Usually the license is expired, the license plate. You don't have your insurance renewed. So you have to leave it off post before you can bring it on post till you get all that stuff situated. And a lot of these people, their license plates are registered in other states, so it's kind of a pain if you're from Virginia and your car's in Washington. So they park a lot of their cars out there, and they just got back from Iraq or Afghanistan. Well, part of my patrol was to go look through that parking lot, make sure, and I took pride in that. Like, you're not going to mess with somebody's car that just spent a year or 18 months overseas, and people take advantage of it because that's what criminals will do, especially people high.
Yep.
So we see this guy with a flashlight peeking in cars. So we go over there, and my partner at the time, again, we weren't really all happy about being police officers. So some people took a little more lax to their duty. Some people took a little more aggressive, trying to write people 100 speeding tickets. I'm like, don't give these guys tickets. Come on. So, I was somewhere in between, like, hey, there's some real bad guys around, and there's people that really deserve a break. So we see this guy, and I'm like, hey, let's go check this dude out. So we pull up, and he's real sketchy. You can already tell. Covered in scabs, really nervous. All of a sudden, as soon as he sees us, really nervous. So my partner, I was like, hey, man, go check out to see if he's been breaking in some of these cars. Look for a broken window or open doors. And the guy, he just kept trying to back up and get away from me. I was like, dude, hold up. And so we run his truck over there, and it's stolen. I'm like, oh, of course. So let's just arrest this dude. And like we always do, usually people are pretty compliant near or on post. And this dude, it just all of a sudden, and a little guy, all of a sudden, big fight. You got to watch the little guys. They're scrappy. So we get in this scrap. Well, he pulls out this, it's like, it ends up being a 25 caliber pistol, little bitty gun, and he's getting it out, and he's trying to get it pointed at me. So I'm like, The only thing you could do is launch on and latch onto it and fight for it. Little tip for what was going on back then on post is, weird as it is, they wouldn't let us carry a bullet in the pipe on our guns. So we had the Beretta 9mm as police officers there, and they were like, hey, don't put one in the tube. So if you ever need to draw your weapon, you got to remember to rack it. So even like shooting this guy was probably not even an option. I mean, hey, we're going to have a gun, but we're not going to have it loaded. Either you trust us or you don't. Like, if you don't trust us, then take it away completely and put me somewhere else. But yeah, so I get in a fight with this guy, and the only thing I can do is just latch onto his gun as he's trying to shoot me with it. And, my partner hears the scuffle and scrum, and we get it all taken away and throw the gun, and we get him in handcuffs. And I'm like, that was close, but it was exciting. I mean, there wasn't a point where I was like, man, I almost died. It was, wow, that was pretty intense, and I loved it and craved it, that whole adrenaline dump of it. It turns out he was some meth head, strung out. He had getting ready to go to deployment on his unit. He was a AWOL guy, a deserter. And while he was out running around getting high, he was breaking into people's cars. Sometimes he admitted he'd come onto post. He'd use his ID, but we don't run it to see, are you AWOL? And he'd come and break into people's cars all night long.
Wow.
Yeah.
I tell you what, I had been on the job quite a while before I ran my first gun, and it wasn't even pointed at me. But what a way to start your career. And even if it's in military police, still, it's police. Yeah. One thing that I read about you encountered there was the long hours that they expected you guys to work. You weren't given meal breaks. You're having to buy food out of your own pocket. And you became an advocate for everybody there, didn't you?
I became a target, would be a better way to put that.
I wouldn't think so from your fellow troops, but maybe from the commander. Yeah,
for sure. So, I mean, that guy ended up going to the prison, and we had a prison on post there at Fort Lewis. Usually the whole West Coast, if you have child rapists and homicide guys that are military folks and you get convicted in the military court, you would get housed there. So this guy gets tried and for AWOL and desertion, and then he gets put in there. So what they end up doing was taking the MPs that worked at the prison and sent them over to work a prison in Iraq. So they took one of our platoons and put them to work prison duty, which was a miserable experience, to say the least. I lucked out and got left on patrol because of the guy that I had arrested that tried to kill me was in prison there. So they're like, okay, well, we don't want to worry about him trying to retaliate or claim that you did something that you didn't do, mistreatment type stuff. So you get to stay on patrol. Well, then that just ended up doubling our hours. So we were working 6 days on and 1 day off, and we were working 12-hour shifts. Problem is you'd have to go in an hour and a half early before your actual shift, and then you stay an hour and a half late to do PT. Like, man, you start adding this up, man, we're working almost 85, 90 hours a week.
Hey.
And if you missed chow, it's one of the good benefits. Right? If you're in the military, you get housing, you get food and health insurance. You get really crappy pay, but if you offset it with that, it's okay. We weren't getting chow hall hours because we were missing it for breakfast and dinner for our roll calls and PT. And then if you worked overnight, you missed lunch unless you woke up after 3 hours to go eat lunch and then go back to bed. So I started looking up the per diem rules of, hey, either can we switch the hours or can we do something for this per diem? Well, I talked to other units that were in our brigade that got deployed to other places, Germany, Louisiana, and other places. And they're like, yeah, dude, we're getting per diem of like $38 a day just to eat for food. I was like, why the hell aren't we getting it? So I asked, went to the chain of command, went to the first sergeant, the captain. I said, hey, what can we do about this? We're all missing meals. They're like, well, get over it. We talked to the colonel. He says, you're lucky you're not in Iraq, which at the time we were like, well, we kind of would rather be over there, but for sure it was lucky we weren't. And they're like, well, some people are dealing without meals over in Iraq. And I'm like, well, you can't guilt me on that. That's not my fault.
Right.
So I looked up all the military policies and I wrote this whole thing out. I typed it out. I highlighted stuff, and I even went to the first sergeant, and she's like, well, do you have any other copies? I'm like, oh, I do. And I went ahead and took the staple out of this one, so when you run it through the shredder, you won't jam the shredder up, because I know you're not going to do anything with this paperwork. So she was not too pleased of it, but she said, hey, there's no per diem, just deal with it. I was like, well, that's not right. So I started writing letters, man, and I wrote letters, and I wrote letters. I took everybody's state representatives and our state senators and our U.S. representatives. So Wesley's stepdad has a cousin that was in the Department of Defense up in the Pentagon. He was a full bird colonel up there. And so I wrote him a letter, and things started happening, we'll say. the 3-star general, the I-Corps general in charge of the I-Corps, who was housed on post there on Fort Lewis, gets a phone call from the Pentagon about meals for some National Guard unit on your post. He's like, who the hell? Why am I hearing this crap? So, yeah, it went downhill pretty quick to the full bird colonel, the provost marshal that was in charge of all the real actual post decisions. And he's like, I need to see this right guy, and I need to see him now. So,
oh boy.
Yeah, mid-shift, I get a call from the first sergeant. Hey, turn all your gear in and come meet me in my office. This can't be good, but I didn't know what it was about. So I sit in front of the colonel for several hours, man. I walked right in, and he's at his desk, real crisp uniform. And he has these little reader glasses on, and he looks up at me. He's like, Cartwright, I'm going to tell you right now, you're not in trouble. You're allowed to write anybody you want. I was like, okay. But where the, I mean, man, he just starts tearing into me. Then he starts, detailing that I'm not hearing this. You're supposed to bring this through your chain of command. You're not in the civilian world anymore. I was like, well, I started answering. Like, well, I did bring this to my chain. Oh boy, locked him up. You're at a position of attention. You sit there and shut up. Chewed me up and down, left and right, man. Eventually got straightened away where they adjusted chow hall hours, and then they gave us these really crappy meals. They called Jimmy Dean meal pack. So hopefully the listeners, if you were ever in the military, anywhere in the late 90s or early 2000s, you'll know what a Jimmy Dean meal pack is. It's terrible.
Yeah.
Orange juice in a tin can, so you taste like you're drinking a battery.
Oh.
Some little Vienna sausages that are cold and covered in fat. And so, yeah, we got that. But at the end, they said, okay, we looked at all your guys' schedules, and everybody that missed a meals and all this had to pay for your meals. They paid us all back a bunch of per diem money from that. So everybody's like, hey, cool. But maybe at the time, like, I was seen as a complainer and a problem child. And not just with the command staff, but everybody else, like, oh, gosh, this guy just can't quit. But, I mean, I did it for everybody. It wasn't just me.
Right.
So,
yeah.
Yeah.
Personally, I think it's the right thing to do. It's even in law enforcement, how many meals we miss.
Yeah.
And, I remember as a rookie, we might go to a drive-in to get a burger or whatever while you're on duty, but you're in the cruiser, you got your radio going. And I can't tell you how many times we chucked them out the window and had to go answer calls or back up somebody. And certainly back up your brothers, but you don't want to miss the excitement either. That's the truth. So you come out of the Army, and what do you do next?
Well, before I had the deployment, I was already applied and got accepted to a couple of law schools. So I was going to go to law school. I get back, I'm like, man, I don't want to go to school now. Wesley's finally graduated. We're deciding where we're going to move. We moved back to Kansas City area. She's from Chicago. So we're like, well, Chicago's expensive, so let's go to Missouri. And I start doing sales, and it was terrible. So for those of you that subprime mortgages, I helped crash the housing market in 2007. Because it was a good way to be a loan officer for these, and they made good sense if you could curb your spending habits. The problem is the people that we were doing loans for couldn't. Right. So then I started selling payroll services, which is even more mundane and terrible. I was all by myself, and like there was no excitement at all, except for I would host happy hours with accountants to try to get their clients, go get some of their clients for this payroll services we were selling. Mm-hmm. And I would, basically treated myself like a Hooters waitress and letting the old lady accountants grope me on these happy hours. And when we would do these, we'd have the old man accountants too, but we'd bring our really good looking sales ladies, and the guys wouldn't ever grope the women, or they would look at them, but they wouldn't ever treat them bad. But the old lady accountants, man, they are very grabby. But if they're going to give your client, I mean, it was almost like what I eventually used with my UC days. It was like anything for the deal, man. If this is what it takes, well, come on, Edna.
Oh, my goodness. That's enough on that topic. But then you ran across an old Army buddy, right, that was on the police department?
Yeah, my buddy. He was my roommate who had to deal with all the headaches that I was in Fort Lewis. And he was a Kansas City cop working in the inner city, one of our most violent districts. And he's like, dude, what's going on? How are you doing? How's things been? I'm like, oh, my gosh, hating life. I'm making good money, but I'm hating life. And he said, well, you should try coming on the police department. I was like, dude, you know how it was in Fort Lewis. Like, I'm not meant to be a cop. I'm just not. It wasn't for me. And he said, dude, the real police work is different than an MP. The structure is different. And inner city of Kansas City, which is a perennial top 10 most violent city in the country when you talk about per capita violent crime numbers. Mm-hmm. He's like, man, you're going to be humping and hustling. You're going to be full of excitement and adrenaline. I promise you, it's fun and it's much different. I was like, okay. So I had to well, how do I tell this to Wesley that I'm considering this? So I said, well, I'm just going to go do a ride along just kind of for fun. just to see. But it was really a pre-employment ride along that you have to do before you get through the hiring process to make sure you see what it's really like and if you really want to apply. And I did it, man. We got in a foot chase right off the bat, and a car chase, and then a homicide on this ride along, and I was like ecstatic. I was like,
where do I sign? Where do I sign?
This is it. Done. I was missing a tribe and a team from what I've always had, either being cross country. I had like a whole motorcycle group I rode with and pissed off people back in college, and at Fort Lewis and military needed a team, and sales was not it. So I was like, sign me up. And so I came. I was like, well, how do I talk Wesley into taking more than a 50% pay cut to come chase bad guys and be dangerous? But
wow,
she's cool as can be, man. She was like, this is going to make you happy, and can we do it financially? I was like, we'll make it.
Nice.
Hooked and sold, man. Sign me up.
Yeah. So how long was your police academy?
6 months. And then you get out of the police academy, and it's a 2-month break-in period.
Did you have to live at the academy, or is just you went the day?
No, it was just a daytime one. So you get there like 6 a.m. and go till 4 or 5 at night. And then, of course, you always have people that struggle. And so the better performers will come day late to help either defensive tactic practices and stuff like that. But, yeah, we got to go home at night.
So tell us some funny story that happened while you were in the academy, because there's always goofy things that happen.
I will say I'm not proud that sometimes I can be a bit of a class clown. That was always something I got even at school. I remember one of my report cards in school was quite humorous. And I remember that's what the teacher wrote instead of like, he does really good in math. He is quite humorous. So if there was going to be somebody doing pranks, it was totally going to be me. And, I was older than most of the other people in the academy because I was almost 30. Not a lot of people right out of college, or a lot of people that had done some stuff or security work or right out of the military after 2 and 4 years of the military. So a lot of young 20, mid-20s, and I'm upper 20s. And then we get some older guys, but one of the instructors one day, we couldn't keep our firearms, but if we went to do training or first thing in the morning, they let us take our Glocks home and then go straight to the range in the morning. And our range was at a different location than the academy. So they took my gun and hid it just as a prank me, and because I was the class leader at the time. So they're like, ha, 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 this guy's going to, and I was. They go like, everybody come back. Somebody's got my gun. And they see me freaking out, running around. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to get them back. So I went and sweet talked the janitor that worked there in the academy. And I said, hey, I need to get in these 2 offices. So I go into the 2 of the instructors' offices and I take all their pictures off their desk, off their wall. And I went home and I scanned them and I put myself in the background of their pictures. So yeah, some of them were like big fans of Tim McGraw, and Tim McGraw came to town, so they got like a picture with Tim McGraw, and I put myself in the background. It took them like 2 weeks. Everybody'd come in the office and look and point and laugh. Obviously, when this came to fruition, they knew that I was the one that did it because I'm all over these pictures, man. But it went bad when one of them was a female instructor, and her husband was a motorcycle cop, and he comes in, he's looking, and they had like a really fancy dinner, and she's got a low-cut dress, and I put myself on the background like I'm looking down at her cleavage. And he looks over and he's like, who the hell is that in our picture? Which then got me yanked right out of class to come get my ass chewed by this motorcycle cop. He's like, you think you're funny talking to my wife? I'm like, I'm not talking to your wife, man. I am just playing a prank because she got me good. So this is just bringing it back.
Did you ever have a run-in with him after, you got on the street?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Did y'all get to be friends or no?
No. Yeah, he thought I was trying to be sly or slick because, unfortunately, with military and law enforcement work, there's a lot of infidelity, and I think that guy was just watching his territory, I guess, if you will. But, he doesn't know that not everybody's like that. I'm faithful to my wife, so.
There you go. I don't drink alcohol anymore, and I don't run around on my wife. I do enjoy my cigars. That's a vice, so that being a workaholic still.
There you go. That's hard to break.
So did you graduate number 1 in your class?
Number 2, I missed. The young lady was just a smidge better than me, and I'll admit it. So she got me.
Excellent. I've got my notes here, and I've already mentioned about my opinion of you being an all-American kid. And you just wanted to serve the public and help your fellow man here, right? Which for me is very admirable. And you had a very strong sense of right and wrong at that time. You just mentioned it. You don't cheat on your wife. And unfortunately, that is very common in law enforcement and the military. So you come out of the academy and you go on patrol. Do you have any say-so where you go or what part of town you're going to be assigned to?
They ask you where you want to go, but they'll put you wherever they want.
Yeah.
So generally, it's known that you'll go into one of our 3 inner city divisions. So we have 6 divisions total in Kansas City, and you're always going to go to one of the 3 inner city ones. It's just a guarantee. The old timers are the people who deserve to get out of the muck and the dirtiest parts, who have transfers to go to our north or south zones, which are predominantly you'll take a spot once you'll backfill them and they'll get to move on or do other specialized units. So you got to give those guys that have tenure be able to go to those units. So inevitably you're in the inner city, which is where I went, right in the thick of where most of the homicides and the violent crime happens in Kansas City, and loved it. Absolutely loved it.
Yeah. That's the place to go for rookies.
You have to. I mean, we were running 40 and 50 calls a night. I mean, that's hustling. And that's just calls for service. That's not your self-initiated and all the other things that you have to do, and if you can find time. But I think I had like 10 homicides that I worked on my 2 months of break-in, which we had 60 people come out of the academy, and you have all these FTOs that you have to work so many of each crime so that you can see how do you act. I'm like, Dr. Death, that was what they kept calling me, and like, damn, Dr. Death over here, you're going to get another dead body?
Yeah. Well, it's
Murphy's Law. You said it. I'm Murphy's Law, man.
And I don't want to go into a lot of detail because I want people to read your book, but you go into a lot of detail of how the training officers put you out there to see how you react. They're not going to stand there and hold your hand. They'll get you started, but then it's up to you to see how you make decisions, what you learned, how do you handle yourself amongst other people, how do you handle yourself, especially at a crime scene where might be inner city where nobody wants to talk to the cops, but yet they want to bitch at you because you're not doing anything.
Yeah.
And you have to learn that. You have to deal with. That's what you learn about being a street cop, is how to deal with people.
And that was what's good about having sales under my belt beforehand, because you can't arrest your way out of every situation. You can't just arrest people and make the problem go away. You'll go to the same house 5-6 times a night if you can't solve it and talk to people and come to a solution. So you're a problem solver through and through.
Yeah. How long were you on patrol before you decided you wanted to do something else?
I was almost at the 6-year mark where I decided, it was probably before that I decided I want to move on, but it takes a while. Once you find somewhere you want to go, you have to process and take a testing and then get selected. But back in those days, you're between years 5 and 7 is where officers usually burn out of what they're doing, and you need a change. Now it's about 3 to 5 years we're finding on new officers. So they're being, mission creep, like all your other guests probably know very well, and the people listening know very well, mission creep. You're asked to do more with a lot less, things that you're not really designed to do, and now we're doing it. I mean, that's like the biggest gripe with police work is that we're now got to be mental health professionals because you deal with a lot of that. I don't think the answer is sending an unarmed social worker into some of these situations to get killed, but we're not designed to be the mental health experts, and we're getting stuck doing that. So all these things contribute to people burning out a lot earlier. I was just short of 6 years and said, undercover work. And it was the same deal. Another buddy had hit me up and said I didn't even know he had been undercover for like a year and a half. He's like, dude, I'm burnt out. I'm leaving it. But he was telling me his stories. I was like, why would you ever leave this? This is like the most exciting things I've ever heard of.
Yeah.
So,
back to what you're saying about the social workers, I agree with you 100%, because you've got the do-gooders who have never even gone on a ride along with a police officer to find out what it's like out on the street with the stuff that you're putting up with, and to see how quickly it escalates into life or death violence.
We just had it happen in Kansas City just not long ago. A young lady with a knife tried to stab the officer, and unfortunately she and her infant died during the struggle. So there is always a weapon. What people don't understand. Even if you go in a house and there's not a gun, there's always a weapon. Something can always be used as a weapon. Knives, hard objects. And if someone's unstable, it's unfortunate. And I'm really sorry for that situation. But a naive social worker is not equipped to handle a violent situation once it happens.
And a lot of people say, well, you guys only want to be cops because you want to go kill people. So in your experience, have you met a single cop that hired on because they want to go kill people?
But believe me, there is no badge of honor of having to draw your weapon and shoot somebody.
Right.
It's against human nature to take someone's life and to harm someone. So once that happens, I promise you that officer is going to be in a world of crap beyond what legal things may happen. It's a psychological thing that is just not, it's just not good.
Right. So you get accepted into narcotics, huh?
Yeah. So my old patrol boss was the sergeant in charge of the undercover squad. And after I tested and did well, and she was like, I know you're a hard worker and I know your attitude. I said, yeah. And I signed up to be on the list, to be drawn. I said, my only hesitation was I've never been around dope before. ever. In college, there would be people that would be smoking weed or doing some other stuff around me or near me at parties, but I was still a runner. So I was, running and training 5Ks, and I was a sub 17-minute 5K runner. I'm doing half marathons. I never smoked a cigarette in my life, which I was like, okay. My only problem is I don't know the dope world. You need to know the dope world. You can arrest people all you want on patrol and think you know the dope world, but until you're in it, in their shoes, on their turf, in their level, you have no clue. So I was like, that's my only hesitation. But again, I'm a goofy guy that can get in, and you can't shame me and scare me from doing it. Like, you dare me, I'm one of those guys. I'll double down on any dare you give me. So there was no hesitation to go do the work and make myself look stupid or terrible. I eventually did look pretty terrible, physical appearance wise. But yeah, once I got picked in, man, it was like, let's go. And I bought into it.
So if you would just let our listeners know, when you're first getting into narcotics like that at the inner city, are you working cartel level cases? What level cases are you at?
No, so that unit, we were only doing ounces and below, which those are the hard ones. Those aren't the easy ones. Like when I would go, and if you go buy a kilo or a pound, those are pretty good business transactions. Now, there can be violence around those for sure, but when you're dealing with the guys dealing, and ladies, believe me, there's plenty of ladies dealing dope. So when you're dealing with people that $50 means everything to them, and you're going to buy $50 worth of meth, highly likelihood of them ripping you off, robbing you, setting you up, just over $50. You wouldn't even imagine like $60 worth of weed, but man, there's so much violence around weed, and it's just weed that people say. But we've had 2 homicides over weed here in Kansas City recently. It was all Snapchat deals where they show up and it's like, well, it's $60. Like, what can go wrong? And then they have robbing the kid and getting a struggle over the gun and getting killed. So
yeah, that's so much. People think, oh, let's legalize weed and all our problems will be gone. There's just so many ways we could go with that, and that's not what we're here to talk about today. But
yeah,
I read this in your book too, and I always said this: like in DEA, we're not going for the street dealers. We're going for the big cartel type people, or at least trying to work your way up to that level. You want to go to the international suppliers. And what I found was that from working, the street as a city cop before I became a Fed, the smaller the dealer, the more violence prone they were. Just because of what you said. That's that $20 bill that you want to get that crack cocaine. That might be all the money they have on them right there. It is to them, robbing you and taking the chance of being killed or killing you.
Yeah, and the repercussions, around small-time drug offenses are basically nil. So a lot of prosecutors in these inner cities, they get probation or they dismiss a bunch of cases because it's a small amount of dope. Like, who cares? Well, then even a lot of the violent crime, that kind of same stuff kind of goes in. So we've had several homicides that you spend less than 7 years in jail. And people are like, 7 years? I'll do that stand on my head. Our bad guys and girls are like, so if they can get away with $50 and their only repercussion is maybe 5-6 years at the worst, they'll take that.
Unbelievable. Yeah. But that's the truth. And that's the do-gooders that, have all these solutions that have never experienced anything themselves. They come up with all these wonderful ideas in their mind, not realizing the type of people that you're actually dealing with. So anyway.
Good theory. A lot of stuff works good in theory, but in practical applications,
isn't that the truth?
Not so much.
Yeah. Absolutely. So we've been going here right about an hour now. What we want to do next for our listeners is we're going to call an end to today's interview, but I want you to come back tomorrow because we're going to go right into Brent's undercover career here. I want to talk about some of the incidents that he was involved with, which ultimately led up to him being shot 6 times. And it's just a miracle of God that he's sitting there talking to us today. So be sure you come back tomorrow to join us here on Game of Crimes. Until then, be safe. I'll see you tomorrow.